The autumn wind carried whispers of judgment across Willow Creek as Hannah Reynolds stepped onto the boardwalk, her scarred face partially hidden behind a curtain of auburn hair. The year was 1878, and the small frontier town in Wyoming territory held little mercy for those who were different. Hannah had learned that painful lesson over the 3 months since arriving, each sideways glance and hushed comment driving her further into isolation. Her fingers instinctively traced the jagged lines that ran from her right temple down to her jaw, a permanent reminder of the house fire that had claimed her parents' lives 5 years ago when she was just 19. She had survived, but carried the marks both inside and out. "Miss Reynolds," the shopkeeper called as she entered Pearson's general store, his voice carrying the same forced politeness it always did. "Your usual supplies." "Yes, Mr. Pearson," she replied softly, keeping her gaze down as she moved toward the counter. "And some extra thread if you have it. Blue, preferably." The store was unusually busy that morning, filled with ranchers and townsfolk gathering supplies before winter settled in. Hannah felt the familiar weight of stares on her back as she waited, clutching her basket tighter. A group of women near the fabric section whispered behind raised hands, their eyes darting toward her when they thought she wasn't looking. "Tragic thing," one whispered, not quietly enough. "But I couldn't bear to look at that every day. No wonder she lives alone at the edge of town." Hannah's cheeks burned, the scarred tissue pulling tight as she fought back tears. She'd come to Willow Creek hoping for a fresh start, using the money from her parents' estate to purchase a small cottage and establish herself as a seamstress. But the work had been sporadic at best, most townsfolk preferring the services of Mrs. Addison, who didn't bear the mark of what many superstitiously called the devil's touch. "That'll be $1.35, Mr. Pearson said, his eyes never quite meeting hers as he pushed her parcels across the counter. As Hannah reached for her coin purse, the store's door swung open with a bang, bringing with it a gust of cold air and a tall stranger whose presence seemed to instantly fill the room. Conversation halted as all eyes turned toward the newcomer. He stood well over 6 feet, broad-shouldered and lean, with dark hair that curled slightly at the collar of his duster. A weathered Stetson sat low on his brow, and the spurs on his boots jingled softly as he moved into the store with the easy confidence of a man comfortable in his own skin. "Morning," he nodded to the room at large, his voice deep and smooth like river stones. "Samuel Vance, looking for work and a place to stay." Hannah quickly gathered her purchases, desperate to slip away before the stranger noticed her. But as fate would have it, in her haste, she bumped against his arm, sending her packages tumbling to the floor. "I'm sorry," she murmured, dropping to her knees to gather her things, using her hair as a shield. "No harm done, madam," he replied, crouching to help. His hands were large but moved with surprising gentleness as he retrieved a spool of thread that had rolled beneath a display. When he offered it back to her, Hannah had no choice but to look up. She braced herself for the familiar reactions, the widening eyes, the quick aversion of gaze, the thinly veiled disgust. Instead, Samuel Vance's clear blue eyes met hers directly, holding steady without a flicker of revulsion. "Thank you," she whispered, taking the thread, confused by his lack of reaction. "My pleasure," he replied, the corner of his mouth lifting in a slight smile. "You dropped this too." He held out her handkerchief, embroidered with delicate violets in the corner. Their fingers brushed as she took it, and for a moment, Hannah felt a strange flutter in her chest that had nothing to do with fear or shame. "Nice stitchwork," he commented, nodding toward the handkerchief. "You're doing," Hannah nodded, surprised by his interest. "Samuel Vance," he introduced himself again, touching the brim of his hat. "New to these parts?" Hannah Reynolds, she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. I should go. She hurried out of the store, feeling the weight of stares following her, but one pair of eyes felt different from the others. They didn't cut or judge. They simply saw. Samuel found lodging at the town's only boarding house, run by a widow named Mrs. Fletcher. By supper time, the whole town knew he was a former Texas Ranger who'd spent the last few years working cattle drives from Texas to Kansas. He'd come to Wyoming looking for more permanent work, something that wouldn't keep him drifting. Heard Mr. Collins at the Double C Ranch is looking for a foreman, Mrs. Fletcher told him over a plate of beef stew. His last one up and left for California 2 weeks back. Might look into that, Samuel nodded, breaking off a piece of cornbread. What can you tell me about the lady I met at the store today? Miss Reynolds. The table fell silent, the other three boarders exchanging glances. Poor thing, Mrs. Fletcher finally said, her voice dropping. Keeps to herself in that little house past the creek. Does seamstress work when folks let her. Face got burned something awful years back, I hear. Shame how some treat her, added Mr. Hobbs, the elderly telegraph operator, as if scars make her less human. My late wife always said the girl's work with a needle is finer than any she'd seen. That's so, Samuel replied thoughtfully, filing away the information. The next morning, Samuel secured the foreman position at the Double C after demonstrating his skill with horses and showing Collins his knowledge of ranch management. The ranch lay 3 miles outside town, but Samuel found himself riding into Willow Creek most evenings after work, telling himself it was for supplies or a drink at the saloon. In truth, his eyes scanned the streets for a glimpse of auburn hair. He spotted her a week later, carrying a basket of laundry behind her small cottage. The place was neat but modest, with a small vegetable garden to one side and a clothesline stretching from the back porch to a lone oak tree. Samuel reined his horse toward her property before he could think better of it. Hannah looked up at the sound of approaching hoofbeats, her expression immediately guarded when she recognized him. "Afternoon, Miss Reynolds," Samuel called, dismounting and leading his horse by the reins. "Remember me? Samuel Vance." "I remember," she replied, clutching her basket tighter. "Is there something you need, Mr. Vance?" "Actually, yes," he said, coming to a stop at a respectful distance. "Got a tear in my good shirt that needs mending." "Heard you're the best with a needle in these parts." Hannah's expression showed clear disbelief. "Mrs. Addison in town usually handles the mending." "Is that so?" Samuel scratched his chin. "Well, Mr. Hobbs at the boarding house specifically recommended you. Said your stitches were neater than anyone's." A faint color touched Hannah's cheeks. I could look at it, I suppose." Samuel pulled a folded shirt from his saddlebag. The tear was substantial, running along the shoulder seam. "Got caught on a fence post," he explained, handing it over. Their fingers brushed again, and Hannah quickly stepped back. "I can have it ready by tomorrow evening." "Much obliged," Samuel nodded. "What do I owe you?" 20 cents should cover it." "Seems fair," he agreed, then hesitated. "Miss Reynolds, I was wondering if you might consider another job as well. Collins at the Double C, my employer, mentioned needing new curtains for the ranch house and perhaps some tablecloths for his wife. Would you be interested?" Hannah's eyes widened. "The Collins family wants my work." "I suggested you," Samuel admitted. "Told them about that fine handkerchief I saw." "Why?" The question burst from her lips before she could stop it. "Why not?" he countered gently. "Talent deserves recognition." Hannah studied him, confusion evident in her green eyes. "Most people prefer not to associate with me." "I'm not most people," Samuel replied simply. "And neither are you from what I can tell." A hint of a smile touched her lips, transforming her face in a way that made Samuel's breath catch. "Very well, Mr. Vance." Tell Mrs. Collins I'd be happy to discuss her requirements. That first commission led to others. Mrs. Collins was so pleased with Hannah's curtains that she recommended her to friends at neighboring ranches. Samuel made a point of delivering and collecting items, creating natural opportunities to see Hannah. Each visit, he stayed a little longer, first accepting offers of coffee, then bringing small gifts. A book he thought she might enjoy, fresh apples from the ranch orchard, a length of ribbon that matched her eyes. The townsfolk noticed, of course. Whispers followed Samuel just as they had always followed Hannah. Why would a handsome, capable man like Samuel Vance spend time with the scarred spinster? Some speculated he was using her for free mending. Others suggested more unsavory motivations. Samuel paid them no mind. With each visit, Hannah relaxed a little more in his presence, revealing a quick wit and gentle humor that had been buried beneath years of self-protection. One crisp November afternoon, Samuel arrived to find Hannah chopping wood, struggling with the heavy axe. "Allow me," he offered, taking the tool from her hands. "Wouldn't want you hurting those fingers. Too valuable with a needle." "I've managed on my own before," she pointed out, but stepped back to let him work. Samuel removed his coat and set to the task with efficient strokes, splitting the logs with practiced ease. Hannah watched, noticing the way his shoulders moved beneath his shirt, the controlled strength in his arms. "Why do you keep coming here, Mr. Vance?" she asked suddenly. Samuel paused, resting the axe handle against a stump. "I enjoy your company, Miss Reynolds. People talk. People always talk, rarely about anything worth hearing. They say unkind things about you because of me." Samuel turned to face her fully. "Then they reveal themselves as fools, and I have no use for fools." Hannah looked away. "You're being kind, but we both know there's truth in what they say. Look at me, Mr. Vance." Her voice trembled slightly. "Really look." Samuel stepped closer, his gaze steady. "I am looking, Hannah. I've been looking since the first day." Gently, he reached out and tucked her hair behind her ear, fully revealing the scarred side of her face. The burn marks tracked from her temple down her cheek in irregular lines, pulling at the corner of her eye and mouth. Hannah trembled but didn't pull away, though her eyes closed as if bracing for rejection. "You know what I see," Samuel's voice was soft. "I see courage. I see strength. I see a woman who survived when others might have given up." Hannah's eyes opened, swimming with unshed tears. "I wish I could believe that's true." "Then let me prove it to you," he whispered. Slowly, giving her time to pull away, Samuel leaned forward and pressed his lips to her forehead, right where the first scar began. Hannah gasped softly, freezing in place. "Each mark tells part of your story," he murmured, kissing the ridge that ran along her temple. "A story of endurance." Another kiss, tracing the line down her cheek. "Of resilience." His lips brushed the corner of her mouth where the scar pulled it slightly askew. "Of beauty that runs deeper than skin." Tears spilled from Hannah's eyes as Samuel's hands cradled her face, his thumbs brushing gently over both the smooth and scarred skin. "Why?" she whispered brokenly. "Why would you?" "Because these roads led me to you," he answered, his own voice rough with emotion. "And I thank God for that every day." When his lips finally met hers, Hannah felt something inside her break open, like a door that had been locked for years, suddenly thrown wide. Her hands tentatively rose to his shoulders, then slid around his neck as she returned his kiss with all the longing she'd kept buried. Winter descended on Willow Creek with unusual ferocity that year. Heavy snows isolated the town for weeks at a time, making travel between the ranch and town dangerous. Samuel managed the journey twice in December, arriving at Hannah's cottage half frozen but determined. "You're a fool, Samuel Vance," Hannah scolded as she helped him out of his ice-crusted coat. risking pneumonia to deliver Christmas ribbons. Not just ribbons, he corrected, pulling a small package from his pocket once he'd warmed by her fire. Though I hope you'll use them for what I have in mind. Hannah unwrapped the package to find a simple gold band, unadorned but perfectly sized for her finger. Her breath caught. I had planned something more romantic, Samuel admitted with a rueful smile, but the weather's not cooperating and I couldn't wait another week. Samuel. She began, her voice faltering. I love you, Hannah Reynolds, he said simply. I want to build a life with you. I've accepted a permanent position managing the Double C, and Collins has offered us the use of the old foreman's cabin. It needs work, but by spring people will talk, Hannah interrupted, though her eyes never left the ring. They'll say cruel things about both of us. Let them, Samuel replied, taking her hand. The only voices that matter are yours and mine, and I know what my heart is saying. Hannah looked up, meeting his gaze. Are you certain, truly certain, this face, these scars, they'll be what you wake up to every morning? Samuel smiled, raising her hand to his lips. I've never been more certain of anything. These scars brought you to Willow Creek. They made you the woman you are, the woman I love. How could I not cherish them? With trembling fingers, Hannah picked up the ring. Then yes, she whispered. Yes, I will marry you, Samuel Vance. They were married 2 days after Christmas in a small ceremony at the boarding house, with Mrs. Fletcher, Mr. Hobbs, and the Collins family as witnesses. Hannah wore a dress of deep blue wool that she had made herself, with ribbons in her hair that matched Samuel's eyes. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Samuel kissed her fully and without hesitation, in front of everyone, scarred side and all. The foreman's cabin became their home, transformed by Hannah's skillful touches and Samuel's carpentry. In the evenings, they sat before the fire, Hannah sewing while Samuel read aloud from books they both enjoyed. Sometimes they simply talked, sharing stories from their pasts or dreams for their future. Spring brought new beginnings. Hannah's seamstress business flourished as word of her skill spread beyond Willow Creek. The Collins children began calling her Aunt Hannah, delighting in the small toys she crafted for them. Even some of the townsfolk who had once shunned her began to see beyond her scars, though others remained coldly distant. Mrs. Addison refused to serve me at the store today, Hannah told Samuel one evening as they sat on their front porch. Said she didn't want my kind handling her fabrics. Samuel's jaw tightened. Want me to have a word with her husband? Hannah shook her head, surprising him with a small smile. No need. Mr. Pearson stepped in himself, told her if she didn't want my business, he'd be happy to lose hers instead. Mrs. Fletcher was there too, said she'd take her considerable boarding house purchases elsewhere if I wasn't welcome. Samuel's eyebrows rose. Well now, that's something. It seems I have friends I didn't know about, Hannah mused, leaning her head against his shoulder. People are seeing what I've always seen, Samuel said, kissing the top of her head. The real Hannah Vance. Summer brought scorching heat and the surprising news that Hannah was expecting. The town doctor confirmed it, estimating the baby would arrive in late winter. A child, Hannah whispered that night as they lay in bed, Samuel's hand resting protectively over her still flat stomach. What if it inherits my scars? Samuel propped himself up on one elbow. First, your scars can't be inherited. They're not in your blood, they're marks of your journey. Second, if by some miracle our child did have similar marks, they'd be beautiful just like their mother. Hannah's eyes filled with tears. How do you always know what to say? I just speak the truth as I see it, Samuel replied, bending to kiss each scar on her face before claiming her lips. The pregnancy progressed well, though the morning sickness lasted longer than expected. By autumn, Hannah's dresses needed letting out, and she glowed with a beauty that even the most hard-hearted townsfolk couldn't deny. Samuel found himself falling in love with her all over again, marveling at her strength and the way she gently cupped her growing belly when she thought no one was watching. One afternoon, in late October, Samuel returned from checking the south pasture to find a group of riders at the main house. Collins met him at the barn, face grim. "Vandals hit the Reynolds place in town last night," Collins said without preamble. "Hannah's old cottage." Samuel's blood ran cold. "What happened?" "Windows broken, hateful words painted on the walls, sheriffs investigating, but—" Collins shook his head. "Thought you should know. Some folks still can't accept that she's found happiness." Samuel rode into town immediately, finding the cottage much as Collins had described. The sheriff was there, along with several townspeople helping to clean up the mess. "Sorry about this, Vance," Sheriff Taylor said, looking genuinely troubled. "Got some ideas who might have done it, but no proof yet." Samuel nodded tightly, surveying the damage. The cottage had been vacant since their marriage, though Hannah had kept it, occasionally using it for fittings with clients who found the ride to the ranch inconvenient. On the front wall, someone had painted "Devil's Bride" in large, dripping letters. "We'll get it cleaned up," Mrs. Fletcher assured him, already scrubbing at the words. "Don't you worry about telling Hannah just yet. No need to upset her in her condition." But secrets had a way of spreading in small towns. By the time Samuel returned home, Hannah had already heard from Mrs. Collins, who had come to deliver fresh eggs. "I'm selling the cottage," Hannah announced as soon as he walked through the door. "I've already written to the lawyer in Cheyenne." Samuel set his hat aside. "You don't have to decide right away." "I do," she insisted, her hands protectively cradling her belly. "That place, it represents who I was before, a woman hiding from the world defined by her scars. That's not who I am anymore." Her chin lifted. "I'm Hannah Vance now, your wife. Soon to be a mother. I don't need to cling to that old life." Samuel crossed the room and took her in his arms. "Have I told you lately how much I admire you? You might have mentioned it," she smiled against his chest. "But I don't mind hearing it again." The cottage sold quickly to a young doctor looking to establish a practice in Willow Creek. Hannah used the money to purchase new equipment for her sewing room and to set aside a fund for their child's education. Winter came again, burying the ranch under blankets of snow. Hannah's time drew near, and Samuel found himself torn between his duties at the ranch and his desire to never leave her side. Collins solved the problem by insisting Samuel work from home whenever possible, sending one of the hands for him only when absolutely necessary. The baby arrived during a howling blizzard in February of 1880. The doctor couldn't make it through the snow, but Mrs. Collins had delivered plenty of babies in her time. After 14 hours of labor, Hannah gave birth to a healthy girl with a shock of dark hair and eyes that promised to be as blue as her father's. "She's perfect," Hannah whispered, cradling the infant. "Look what we made, Samuel." Samuel sat on the edge of the bed, one arm around his wife, the other hand gently stroking his daughter's cheek. "What shall we name her?" Hannah studied the tiny face. "Elizabeth," she decided, "after my mother, Elizabeth Grace Vance." "It suits her," Samuel agreed, pressing a kiss to Hannah's temple, right along the path of her most prominent scar. "Just as your name suits you, Hannah Grace and Mercy." "You've been reading that book of name meanings again," Hannah teased weakly. "Knowledge is power," he winked, quoting one of her favorite sayings back to her. The spring of 1880 brought changes to Willow Creek. The railroad finally reached the town, bringing new settlers and opportunities. Among them was a photographer who set up a studio on Main Street, offering family portraits. "We should have one taken," Samuel suggested as they walked past the new shop one Sunday after church, little Elizabeth sleeping peacefully in Hannah's arms. Something to mark the occasion of her first spring. Hannah hesitated, her old insecurities briefly surfacing. "I don't know if." "Think of it," Samuel continued gently. "Years from now, Elizabeth can look back and see how much her mother loved her, how beautiful her family was." The next day they sat for the portrait, Samuel in his best suit, Hannah in a dress of soft lavender, her hair arranged to frame rather than hide her face, and Elizabeth in a christening gown Hannah had spent weeks creating. When the photographs were ready, Hannah stared at the image in wonder. For the first time she saw what Samuel had always seen, not a woman defined by scars, but a complete picture of love, strength, and joy. "It's us," she said simply, tears in her eyes. "Our family." "The first of many portraits," Samuel promised, kissing each line of her scars as he had done countless times before. "Each one a new chapter in our story." That night, as they lay in bed with Elizabeth sleeping in her cradle nearby, Hannah traced the lines of Samuel's face in the moonlight. "I used to think my scars were a punishment," she confessed, "that God had marked me to keep me apart from others." "And now?" Samuel asked, catching her hand and kissing her palm. "Now I see they were a map," she smiled, "leading me here to you, to this life." "Roads home," Samuel nodded, understanding completely. "Roads home," Hannah agreed, leaning in to kiss the man who had seen beauty where others saw only scars, who had kissed each line as if they were roads leading him to his heart's destination. Outside their window, the Wyoming sky spread endless and star-filled above the ranch. Inside, Hannah and Samuel Vance held each other close, their daughter's soft breathing a gentle reminder that sometimes the most difficult journeys led to the most beautiful destinations. And in the years that followed, as their family grew and their love deepened, Hannah's scars faded in importance not because they disappeared, but because they had been embraced as part of a greater whole. A testament to a woman who had survived fire to find love, who had been shunned only to discover belonging, who had walked through pain to arrive at joy. Roads, indeed, leading home.